Hello, and welcome to the Eleemosynary moment. My name is Aaron Spears.
And I'm the Brad Hathcock.
Welcome back to the Brad Hathcock.
Welcome, sir.
How was your
Good to see you.
vacation? Good to see you too.
It was good, man. Productive. I got a lot of bourbon that I wanted. I even got to give some to a buddy of mine. So I can't complain. I stood out in 18-degree weather outside of a distillery in order to get some good bottles of bourbon that retail for over $1,000 on the secondary market. I did not pay that for a single bottle, that's for sure. But good trip. Exhausting, but good trip.
You filled a bottle of whiskey, didn't you? Or bourbon?
I did. So there's a place called Whiskey Thief Distilling, and it's a very small distillery. Basically, there's like a gift shop that looks like it's in a barn, and then you drive down a dirt road, and there's another barn. And when you go in there, they have like all the shit that they use for distilling. They had like a couple copper stills with column like they're called column stills, and got to do that plus a tasting. With the tasting you got a glass, but in the tasting what they would do is, which is why it's called Whiskey Thief, is they use a copper thief to take bourbon right out of the barrel and put it in your cup.
What's a thief?
It's basically like this tube that they stick in, and it fills up with whiskey, and then there's a hole in the top that you plug with your
Oh,
thumb, and then you let go of your thumb, and the air pushes the bourbon out.
like a
Um,
pipette.
yes, yeah, a giant pipette for bourbon, and so they do everything there, and they do not distribute. You can only get the bourbon there, and so everything is also like barrel proof. They don't proof down any of their bourbon or anything like that, which is nice. So you're getting some like 130 proof, 122 proof, kind of all over the place. They had a rye. They had 5 barrels, and there was just like 2 women standing behind the barrels, and you would go up and hold out your little cup, and they would fill your cup for your tasting, sip it, come back whenever you're ready for the next one, and you tell them which barrel you're on and everything. It was cool. I enjoyed it.
How do you take your whiskey though? I mean, when you're drinking it like do you drink it at like room temperature? Or are you getting like ice? What do you do?
I personally like to drink my bourbon neat, which is no ice, just in a glass. And there's, a lot of people like to use like a rocks glass or something like that. But they make these little like whiskey glasses that are kind of like tulip shaped. It's supposed to help with the flavor of the whiskey as well. So like beer, they like this is just a regular beer glass, but there's different beer glasses for different beers and stuff. It's supposed to enhance flavors and all that stuff. So
What you
same
drinking?
principle applies for whiskey. This is homebrew.
Oh, cool.
I made this here beer. It's a 6% IPA. It is a blood orange vanilla IPA.
You're just a man of many talents.
Yes, I obviously like alcohol. I also might be having beer and bourbon and like all this other shit, but it was a cool trip. I think next year, uh, I might try to go for the entire week of Thanksgiving. So I left on Thanksgiving. I had dinner with my in-laws, and then we packed up and promptly hit the road for the 6-hour drive we had to Lexington, Kentucky.
Ugh.
It wasn't that bad on the way down. The drive home sucked, but on the drive home, we went to 2 different distilleries. We stopped for lunch. We went to this like store called Party Source, and they had more alcohol than you can even imagine for not being a distillery or anything like that. But it was right next to a distillery. So right after we left the distillery, we went over to that place to like check out all the alcohol they have. But yeah, it was a good trip. I mean, Buffalo Trace was obviously like my main focus because I love a lot of their stuff, but they seem to do special releases. And the point of my trip was the special releases that I figured were coming out on Black Friday. So my target was Woodford Reserve because they had a bourbon called Double Oaked that you could only buy at the distillery. But
I love
come
Woodford Reserve.
I do too. They're a little pretentious, like at the distillery itself. If you ever get to go, highly recommend. I imagine you'd end up going with me. because I've done it multiple times, but I wanted the double oaked from 2024. Now they released a pack of 4 whiskeys. They weren't full bottles. They were like the little 370, and the pack was like $350. Now it had the double oaked in it, but it was the 2023, not the 2024. And I sound like a pretentious asshole because the 2023 was not as good as the 2024. So I did not make that purchase.
Hey, if it's not good, it's not good.
Fuck them, because Buffalo Trace, you get in line like early, okay? Generally, people get in line. I was in line at 7:45 in the morning, and they open at 9.
Oh my god.
And there was 150 people ahead of me, let's say. Um, and then there had to have been 500 or 600 people behind me.
Good lord.
Yeah, so when they opened up at 9 o'clock, it was packed. Now they released a whiskey called Elmer T. Lee. It was the 100-year tribute bottle. It was bottled in 2019 and hasn't been released in, I think, 5, 6 years.
Wow.
And it was like $120 a bottle, but it's
That's not bad.
retailing online for anywhere from like $800 to $1,300.
Damn.
But then they had, and this is why I want to go every day during the week of Thanksgiving, because while I went on Black Friday expecting a special release, which I assumed correctly, they did a release every day during the Thanksgiving week. So one day was a bottle of E.H. Taylor 4 grain, which I had never even heard of before, and you were allowed one bottle per lifetime. So you go, they scan your license, give you a wristband, and then when you go to check out, they use like a scanner and they scan your wristband and you go into a system. And basically, if you would ever try to buy that again, they would say no dice.
Did you look up the prices for that online?
No, I didn't. The bottle itself was only again about $120. But since it's a once in a lifetime purchase, I imagine the secondary market's probably going to be fairly high. And then they released a single oak project, which is like up and down. They have a bunch of those. They release them kind of randomly. So that one wasn't super special. The one I got was relatively special. And then they had another release of, I believe it was called Daniel Weller. Weller is like a wheated bourbon, so it's a little bit sweeter in flavor, not as harsh. But that was $500 a bottle and retails on the secondary market for about $3,500. So,
Fuck.
and I could have had, if had I gone, I would have had 2 of them, which I would have just probably straight up bought both of those and then maybe not bought anything else. I don't know, because that's
Uh,
$1,000 like right down the drain. And the problem is I'm not in the habit of selling bourbon. Like
you're in the habit of drinking
I'm
it,
in the
which
habit
is
of drinking
different.
it. So, but all in all, I brought about 14 or 15 bottles of bourbon back.
Yeah, I mean, the distilleries will probably be happy to know that you are somebody who won't sell their product online. You'll just actually have it.
Yeah, there are some states that are trying to crack down on people who come and get allocated bourbon just to sell it on the secondary market. So, like in Ohio, next door to us, you can get a bottle of something that's somewhat rare, assuming you get there for when it drops, and you'll get it for retail price because they have state-run liquor store, so they don't jack up the prices too bad, and then people are turning around and selling them on the secondary market. So they are trying to tamp down on that so that doesn't happen. I'm just not in the business of doing that. If I'm spending $500 on a bottle of whiskey, I'm doing it because I'm drinking that shit. Like, I am not turning around to sell it, even though I would have had 2 bottles of it, and that would have paid for quite literally my entire trip. My hotel, my gas, all of my meals, cocktails that I had that weren't at distilleries completely would have paid for it.
Yeah, it's we very different but somewhat similar in the video game world too, where they put out like a special edition, and in the past people would log on and they would buy it and then they would sell like whatever it was online, but it was limited quantities and they would just buy like 10 of them and sell them. Yeah, they've since started cracking down on that as well. So two very different.
And they should.
Yeah, I think they should. I wanted to ask you because I've only ever been wine tasting, which I love. I love wine.
I also love wine tasting. I'm not
Yeah,
gonna
it's
lie.
fun.
I am a member of a wine club, actually. So I do all the things like that I enjoy. I'm willing to spend the time and the money. So
I
like
think we're
I'm
both like
actually
that. Yeah.
yeah, like I'm in a wine club where I get like a free tasting for two people every month. I get two bottles of red wine every month. Now the problem is the winery that I'm in the club for does not exist in the state of Pennsylvania. So
Ew.
I have to travel to Ohio to pick up my bottles. So I don't go that frequently, but they never expire. So I currently have 16 bottles of wine waiting for me to pick up
Oh,
in
cool.
Ohio.
That's awesome. I love that. So the reason why I brought up wine tasting was because I was going to ask you. We know how you like cleanse the palate when, between tastings. How do you do that with like bourbon,
Same
or do
thing, just
you? Okay.
water. I mean, like, just take a sip of water to kind of cleanse that palate down if you care. I don't. I must say, like, as much as I enjoy tasting different bourbons and stuff, I don't have that, like, super sophisticated palate where, I just recently watched the movie Sideways, right? About, with Paul Giamatti and talking about wine. And, like, he's like, oh, I taste notes of pear and, like, all this other shit. I don't get a lot of that. I can give you some of the flavors that I taste up front and tell you, obviously, whether or not it's boozy compared to other ones and shit, because I've had it. But that's super sophisticated, where they put like one stick of cinnamon for 500 gallons of fucking wine and you can taste it. I can't do that. Like, that's too much. That's like sommelier level shit, and I just don't have it. I also destroy my palate with so much hot sauce and bourbon and like other shit that it's impossible.
I've always found that I was able to do it with not white wine, but red wine. I can pick up certain elements of things without being told what's in it, particularly if it's like spicy, kind of like peppery flavor.
Yeah.
But when it comes to like bourbon and stuff, like it's almost like they're different. They all taste different, but you don't have to like reset your palate because it's all like kind of heavy. I mean, like it's gonna reset it for you, basically.
Yeah, so going actually back to that Whiskey Thief distilling that I was talking about, what's interesting, the guy there, he's one of the head distillers, was a distiller at Buffalo Trace for like 15 years. And so he's working in this like small place, this old man, real nice guy. He taught me like a few tricks. So if you, especially when you're dealing with like high proof, kind of blowing like as you're sipping, blow out of your mouth like you're blowing out like a candle on a cake, and that'll actually help dissipate the alcohols that are on your tongue, and you'll get actually more of the flavors. Now,
That
no
works
one
with
else,
tequila too.
yeah, so no one else has ever told me that before. So that was like a first for me.
Yeah, I picked that tip up probably 10 years ago. Somebody said if you're taste testing like tequilas, you want to like do that, and I tried it with whiskey and didn't get the same results, but with tequila, it definitely works.
So do you like bourbon? You're just not like the biggest aficionado of it, right?
Well, for me, yes, I do. I like whiskey. It's just that there's never really I don't find myself like wanting to casually drink it because well, for whatever reason. Like remember like we always joke like, "Oh, we have a shot of Jaeger or whatever." When we're playing video games and it's like it's just quick and easy and you don't really give a shit because it's not special, but bourbon is like I don't want to just take a shot of bourbon during like a video game. Like I want it to be more meaningful.
That's
So
fair.
then yeah, so then I don't want to go out and buy a $50 bottle of Woodford Reserve and I mean I have whiskeys from like other countries. I have some stuff from Ireland and some stuff from India actually, which is really weird because it's like very fruitful, very flowery. It's like I don't know what they do with it, but it just tastes like different from anything else I've ever had.
Yeah.
So, and there's Japanese whiskeys, and like I appreciate all that
Canadian.
shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, but when it comes to like actually drinking, sometimes I don't even think about it in my mind. I'm not like I could go for a bourbon or a whiskey. Like
Right.
I have it in my house, and then I forget it's there. So maybe I should just be better at it.
I'm The way I kind of describe this, and it seems pretentious, and it is. I'm more a purveyor of like things that people have trouble getting, and
Yeah.
I take more joy in owning something that other people are having trouble getting.
Yes, I know.
And I love the whiskey and stuff, but like I just recently got a bottle of single barrel Canadian whiskey, actually also made by Buffalo Trace, but sold mainly in Canada. It's a little bit hard to get here, and I overpaid for the bottle a little bit to the tune of like 2.5 times of what its normal retail price. But I also tasted it when I was at a restaurant in Ohio, and they were charging like $25.
Damn.
So yeah, I mean, dude, I've tried Pappy Van Winkle. I think it was either the 15 or the 23 year, and that was $57 a pour for like a 1 ounce pour, not even like a 2 ounce pour.
I would do it just to do it.
Dude, and that's why I did it, because a bottle of Pappy Van Winkle you pretty much cannot find at retail. Like if you're gonna find one, it's gonna be secondary market, and that shit is like $2,000. Like, so I'm clearly not buying that. I'm not gonna spend 2 grand on a bottle of bourbon. Like I don't have money like that, but you know,
Well, I had the opportunity once to try a very expensive. I don't know. I think it was like 95 a pour maybe, but it was like maybe more than that, and it was a secret, not a secret, but like a non-advertised hidden away bar in MGM Grand in Vegas, and the whiskey was from 1942, and
nice.
kind of kick myself for not doing that. I regret it, but like it was just having a bottle there that was that old was like, what the fuck?
I think if you are able to enjoy it, go for it. Like if you are one that's going to sip that and be like, yeah, like that's good. It's delicious. There's a stigma in the whiskey drinking kind of realm where like I like to drink my neat. Some people look at me like I'm crazy for that. Other
I don't
people
think
like
so.
to put ice in theirs, or some places give you like a little water dropper with limestone filtered water. It's supposed to like open the whiskey up a little bit and give it some different flavors and stuff. I abide by that as well, but I don't usually put ice in my whiskey unless it's a cocktail of some sort. But it's just like if you like that kind of thing, just do it. Like if you have the money, sure, it's $50 for less than a shot would be really, but just enjoy it because it might not always be there.
Yeah, I feel the same way about like sushi, and I feel the same way about champagne because I love champagne as well. It's okay if you can do it. It's okay, yeah. Which we both could probably do. So, and also I'm like you. I like to have things that nobody else can seem to get. I do that a lot. I have this aliens print right in front of me that I had framed, and it's like a one of a kind thing that like for my eyes only, and there's something neat about that. Well, I guess we should probably talk about
Real stuff that
Newsy.
people care about.
Yeah, because we in the past week, I guess, like there's not really been a lot as far as like the cabinet picks go for like American policy and Donald Trump. But I will say that there's a reason why it's dangerous to have a president who's completely applesauce brain and MIA. And that's because, first of all, Trump is like basically the president right now, which is wild to me because our vice president got liquored up in Hawaii and put out that awful video, and Biden's falling asleep in Africa. So, like, really, it's Trump. And the reason why it's dangerous is because this week there have been like 3 governments that have had like serious problems. South Korea just decided they were going to do like he was just going to do like a martial law, and they were like, no. And the reason why that's dangerous is because North Korea is always paying attention. So, like, they could take advantage of that if they wanted to.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. And
Well,
then
not really. They have no real way of invading South Korea at this point because they blew up all the roads to South Korea to stop
actually,
people from escaping.
I mean, well, oddly enough, like we should probably talk about just the craziness of North Koreans in combat because it's just been hilarious. But the French government is the one that fell today. Not really that.
Socialists.
The only thing that's weird about that is because they did it on the day I think that Trump and Macron and I think Jill Biden actually are going to the opening of the Notre
Yeah.
Dame.
Yep, it's been closed for 5 years because of that fire, and they're finally reopening.
Yeah, which is cool, I guess. And then the UK government, I think, is also in a Keir Stormer is trying to hang on for dear life. So, like these are the things that are like, it's bad to have chaos in the world when your president is,
Well, I
I
know
don't know,
Keir Starmer's been praising Trump quite a
which is
bit
weird because
recently.
he's a labor guy who's like super lefty.
Thing is, I think everybody's kind of just falling in line, right? Like we saw Justin
Yes.
Trudeau go down to Mar-a-Lago and pretty much bend the knee
Tell the
to
story. Tell what he said.
um I can't remember what I said.
No, what Trump told Trudeau, like, we should just make you the first state
Yeah.
and
Oh, yeah, right, right, right.
you could be the
So
governor.
so Trudeau basically said, "Well, you can't hit us with 25% tariffs. It'll destroy our economy." And Trump was like, "Well, you could just be the 21st state and we'll let you be the governor of that state." So like basically we would absorb Canada into the United States.
There was
Imagine if Canada got statehood before Puerto Rico
I know, I would welcome
or
the
even
Canadian.
DC.
Well, also, one thing that didn't come out of that was the follow up, which was somebody with at that table said something like, "But Canada's pretty left wing. They would get two senators." And Trump very brilliantly quipped, "Well, we'll just make it two states then, and we'll have the the right on the west and the left on the east or whatever in Canada." And it was like very Trumpian way of looking at things.
But well, it would be interesting, in my opinion, to see what the feel of Canadians in U.S. politics in the areas that again aren't cities.
It's got to be right wing, right?
Right, like how do they feel? Because remember the whole like trucker thing that happened up in Canada where they were debanking people and all that other stuff. Like that's that would I guess be considered right wing. That's what they were trying to label these truckers as, is like right wing. Uh,
Which is always through the American context because we're all so
sure.
selfish over here.
Sure, but they say it's the same thing in Europe, right? Like the right wing over there isn't the same as like the right wing here. It's definitely
We
different,
say it all the time.
but nobody really knows what that means for the most part. So I guess it's a little bit different. Like France just definitely elected a completely left wing government, which is actually Macron's fault. Like he invoked the
Yeah,
socialists, and the socialists won because he just wanted to defeat Marine Le Pen. So they invoked all these like really hardcore socialists, and then the socialists were like, we want to increase the tax rate on the wealthy to 90%.
and reduce
And
the retirement age to like 62.
right. So now then the entire government's going to start collapsing because they can't come together. And if there is some sort of like, I don't know, runoff or like special election, Marine Le Pen and the conservative parties over there have been gaining traction for a while. I mean, they needed a coalition of the very hardcore socialist groups and the more centrist groups to stave off Marine Le Pen in the last election. That could change.
She actually endorsed the lowering of the retirement age, I think. So that's kind of her ploy to get him out, is actually by making allies with the other socialist groups or whatever.
I mean, it's been coming for a while. Like, I don't know if you
Yeah.
remember the yellow vest protests and stuff over there
Yeah.
as well. They've seen a lot of upheaval in France, and France is quite they're an odd ally of the US. Like, they didn't support like the invasion of Afghanistan and Iraq and stuff like that. So there's somewhat of an anti-American sentiment there that's been had over the last 30 or so years. So it's interesting to see what they do because Marine Le Pen, I would imagine, would actually probably be more pro-Western than some of the other
I would
government
guarantee
officials
it.
there.
Well, I mean, Macron's position, again, France being very interesting, and in weird ways. Like, so Israel, their policy on that was like, oh, the international court wants to arrest Netanyahu, and then our government was like, we don't recognize that, and France was like, well, we kind of do. And
Hmm.
then Israel was like, well, then you're not going to negotiate with us anymore. We're just going to cut you out of it. And then they were like, oh, wait, no, wait. We changed our mind. Like, we want to come back to the table. So, like, France wants to be involved in things, and they always have been. It's very, but it's strange because they're not as, like, engaged with the whole Ukraine thing. That's more of like a Germany thing. So it's like kind of odd how like France plugs into global politics.
Yeah. Well, I know, like, we were talking about government collapses and things like that, and you're seeing something similar in Germany as well. And his name is what?
Uh, Schultz.
Scholz, whatever. Well, there's starting to be a movement over there picking up where they would leave the EU just like Britain did. And we had Brexit, and remember when everybody was like, the that Britain's gonna collapse if they leave the European Union, and like that didn't happen. Obviously, like it's a more of a long term play, but like they were like, people trade with the EU, not with Britain, and it's like, well, they will trade with Britain if they need their goods, like,
Yeah,
and
that's the whole thing, right? Like the
yeah,
EU
and
needs them more than they need the
pretty
EU.
much like the EU is just a level of bureaucracy. That's all it is.
Totally.
But
It's awful.
this is being fueled by immigration policies because you don't get to set your own immigration policy. Like if they let you into the EU, you basically have carte blanche to like run around and do whatever you want within the EU. And I believe this is true. I've heard this, that if you have citizenship, like, so say you apply for citizenship to one country that belongs in the EU, while that doesn't make you a citizen of other countries in the EU, it sure as fuck makes travel a lot easier. So it's a lot easier to jump from like country to country and stuff. So once you get that EU passport, it's pretty much free reign for you.
And the EU being a very left-wing organization, they have such good open hearts, and they bring everybody from the world in, and what happens is everybody in the world gets that message, and you import terrorism, and you import people who don't share the values of West, so you don't get freedom of speech and women's rights and all this other shit. And you just like you let the EU basically control your destiny as a country.
Right.
And that's what's happening now in all of these places. The United Kingdom too, by the way, they have double signage now in London. It's English and Arabic. So like it's coming from all these different places, and there's all these special interest groups. And how do you
I
deal with a radicalized population?
so I understand like the radicalized piece of that, but I would push back against the dual language signage because they do that with English in a lot of
They
European
do that in
countries.
California with Spanish.
I'm
I get
sure.
it. Yeah.
So, like, I understand it when you have a population that's growing in that size, like, you don't just force them to assimilate. Like, you, I guess, are engaging with them, doing whatever you can. But so I push back on that. Like, that's not
Well,
really an
no,
argument, but
I'm not saying it's a bad thing per se when it comes to the language. What I'm saying is they put it they changed it to Arabic because there's such a massive Arabic population there now.
right.
And they don't share the values of the UK or of Britain, like
Right. I think what we're seeing as a whole, kind of across the board in a lot of countries, is just a pushback against immigration. Obviously, we're seeing it here in the US. It's a big reason why Donald Trump was elected, because that push for immigration, that was like one of the number one things people said about electing Donald Trump. You're seeing it in the UK, you're seeing it in Germany. Sweden is like really starting because they have a huge
they got it
migrant
bad.
population. I believe they're starting to try and like push these people out and back to their countries and stuff.
You can't go to certain places in Stockholm because you'll get fucked up. Like
Yeah.
cops don't go to certain places because they'll beat the shit out of you.
Right. And I think we're just seeing a huge pushback against that kind of thing. So, and it's across the board. We're seeing all kinds of shit. South Korea obviously just declared martial law because there was some like pro North Korean government officials or whatever.
It's unclear. Yeah, that one's
Yeah, it's
weird.
kind of odd. But then basically their government came together, voted to turn that, like, undeclare martial law, and now they're requesting that their prime minister stands down
Yeah, they're going to
and
impeach him,
resigns.
which
So
he will be impeached for that. Like, you can't do that. You can't
No,
just
you can't
declare
just
martial law.
declare martial law. And what's funny is this came kind of out of nowhere from South Korea, in my opinion, because South Korea is obviously like a big US ally.
And a democracy, and they've been a democracy for about 45 years.
Correct. And then you just see like out of nowhere this come out, and but how did these pro North Korean government officials get in there? I don't know.
I don't even know what that means. Like, what do you mean they're pro North Korea? Like, I'm
Well,
not so sure.
it's kind of the same thing with like Russia and Ukraine, right? There are pro-Russian separatists. There are people in the Ukrainian government or who would like to be in the Ukrainian government that would maybe not necessarily want to be a Russian state, but they would like to open up trade with Russia. They would, like to do those kinds of things.
Pro
So,
Russian tendencies.
yeah, and that was Putin's whole thing. It was like not even necessarily calling Ukraine back into Russia and saying, well, now it's part of Russia. They wanted to institute a pro Russian government there so that they can do whatever. Which I mean, it would basically be the same thing in probably Putin's eyes, really, but it just on the surface wouldn't look like it's a Russian state. It would
Like
just,
Belarus.
yeah, like, because it's the same thing, right? Belarus, very pro Russian,
But not really by
but
choice.
they're kind of different in a sense. But you're right.
I want to go back to the immigration thing because I just wanted to point out something that you could agree or disagree, but like we're kind of lucky again in America because we have an immigration coming from a place in the world where they want to get here because they want to assimilate and they want to, and we have a constitution and we have basic rules and freedoms, and those can never be taken away from us. Whereas if you import from, say, Syria, which we should talk about, those refugees are not going to assimilate into France or Sweden, and you're going to ultimately like erode those values because they don't have a constitution. So like even the immigration thing is not very similar between the two countries per se, although like you're saying, globally people are kind of turning against the whole idea.
Yeah, I think that it's just kind of becoming this global trend, towards being like, say, more like a pro-American style of things. Like the election of ironically enough, it's the election of Donald Trump seems to have set all of this in motion. Like so much has happened over the last month after our election because obviously we're a world superpower. The prevailing thought really is we go as the US goes and so on and so forth. And so you're with the election of Donald Trump now the second time, because people have already seen what happened the first time, they're moving in this direction of Donald Trump. I mean, we saw what happened obviously with like 10/7. So Israel is definitely like more pro Trump because it seems like he's going to get it done, but it also seems like Trump has said like, look, I want this war over before I get into office. He doesn't want to deal with it.
Well,
So,
he wants the hostages back, which they're not going to do it, even though he said that.
right.
And maybe that's fine. I don't know.
But he also threw out the idea of like bombing Gaza and Hamas directly, from American ships. Like they could just park a couple of battleships outside of Gaza and start raining down fucking artillery if they
Well,
really wanted to.
it's no secret on this podcast what my thoughts are on that, which is we
No,
shouldn't build a goddamn pier
they'll just
into
sail right
Gaza.
over the. They'll just sail right over the pier and
I
break it
mean,
even further.
yeah, it's like, fuck.
But it's a tactic that he ultimately uses, and I have to say, like, everything that Donald Trump has done so far, and he's not even in office, has really made people like think, it's the 25% tariffs on Canada. So Trudeau comes down and goes, that'll cripple our economy. And he's like, not my problem. Like, do what you're supposed to do then to like help us out, and we won't do that. Like, he uses it as a tactic to bring people to the table. He said the same thing about Mexico. He's going to put a 25% tariff on Mexico unless they start like stemming the flow of migrants to the border. Do you know what they've done? I believe they sent their military, and they broke up two separate migrant caravans that were on their way to the United States because they don't want 25% tariffs. They import something like, I think 45% of their economy relies directly on US imports. And you could just say, well, we're done doing that now. Like maybe we're just done like exporting to you, and it would absolutely destroy their economy. Absolutely. So I don't know, man. He like everybody's falling into line for Donald Trump right now. Like it's
It's a
just the way it's going.
you remember that term they use, vibe shift? It's a
Yeah,
vibe shift because it was
100%.
literally Hitler up until the election, and then it was over. It was resounding, and then it wasn't just American journalists or whatever. Like people, like there's probably not going to be a women's march or a pussy hat or these other countries that are like, oh my god, NATO, like they're just kind of falling in line, like you said, and it's very interesting.
Well, we didn't see this in his last administration, right?
Well, because he was literally Hitler in the last one too, and then he did bad things and good things and COVID, and I mean, really, this is all kind of like, if you think about it, and this is kind of my worldview. COVID did all this. Like, this is all a result of that, but it's such a long tail.
Yeah, it's hard to say that because he did handle obviously the very like first 10 months or so, 9 or 10 months of COVID. And he did shut the economy down. Like, he
He was
like you
awful on
always say,
COVID.
like he gave Fauci a medal or whatever. And now we're seeing that what just came out, the House took a look at like basically everything that happened during COVID.
It's a subcommittee report.
They have found billions of dollars that have gone to fraud and waste during all that COVID spending, and it was a huge failure. Huge failure.
That report also all but confirmed that it came from a lab, because why would it come from a fucking pangolin? Like, really, like our entire media, damn them all, a pox on their houses, all that shit, because they dropped the ball. They continue to drop the ball, actually.
Well, I think where like so the media, it started with COVID, where people started pushing back, and it's like the media is lying about COVID, which means the government was lying about COVID, right? And people started pushing back against that for sure. And then it became the Trump is Hitler thing. Media pushed back against that, and it was. I think I just saw. I think like 67% of people now uh get their news from like alternative sources like Twitter/X,
Podcasts.
casts, things like that. And
I
I
got
mean,
I got I got told specifically by somebody recently that they get their news from our podcast.
that's wild. I would never do that.
I mean, we're pretty
I personally like to say
well.
wild shit,
we
but
have we have
I'm
well
usually right.
we do have two different viewpoints usually on most, not everything, but like, we're not simpatico on all things, but we're civil and we do discuss it. I mean, so whenever you have like a kind of a debate going on over a podcast like ours, it's a small podcast, we have a small audience, but people do get information from us that they might not get otherwise, like the France thing or the UK thing, or what's going on in Syria right now, which I still
That's
want to talk
because we
about.
we like to talk about the smaller topics of things that you don't see unless you go to like the fifth page of a website that you're looking for news on.
Yeah.
Because like even though those are like important things, they bury them so you don't see them.
Yeah, they intentionally bury them.
They want you to be misinformed. Okay, they want you to focus on the Kardashians and the Taylor Swifts and all this other stuff. Like, they don't want you to be informed about things because then you can make an informed decision about things, and then it runs into problems for the media, for the elites, all that shit.
Yeah, and I mean, it really is hilarious that the word misinformation. There was recently an article published by an author, and he used Chat GPT to generate an article about misinformation, and there was misinformation in it. So, like, the misinformation complex, whatever you want, like, it fails at every level.
It absolutely does. I do like to say wild shit here, but a lot of the things that we do say here are heavily researched in our opinions. Like you and I, we don't necessarily coordinate on what we're going to talk about. There's an assumption between the two of us that we're pretty up to date on stuff.
Yeah,
I will admit when I'm not, I will ask you questions about things that I might not be up to date on, and so on and so forth. Or like, we're like, have you seen this? you know, and that's just the way that we operate. But there are a lot of things here that we say that have come true. One of the things that you and I have railed on a lot is the economy, and that we're looking at some kind of like huge downturn in the economy. And that is going to happen. Okay. We might not be right on the exact time frame, but it is going to happen. Elon Musk said himself, there's going to be some short-term pain for
yes,
long-term gains. He said it himself,
it happens.
including
Yeah,
in the economy. It's going to happen. He understands that.
look at
And
Argentina. I mean, look how they turned that around.
right.
That's short term pain for long term gain. Right?
Hey, Javier Milei is the GOAT right now.
Killing it, killing
He
it.
reduced uh he reduced poverty by like 11,000% or something like that.
It's
Like
wow.
an insane amount. I think everybody who obviously there's a lot of people who hate libertarianism because it's like, well, you just want like
Anarchy.
free capitalism where there's no rain, it's nothing's reined in, all this other stuff. Not really. Like the government has its place in that stuff, but if you look at Argentina, what he's doing is deregulating stuff that's completely overregulated, and it reduced the poverty rate by I think like 11,000%. It reduced inflation by like 6,700%,
These are
something
real
like
numbers,
that.
by the way. They sound crazy, but they're
Like
not. They're real.
I mean, you'd have to fact check the actual numbers, but they're high. They're
Yeah,
really high. And everybody hates libertarianism, but like, the way that socialists are like, socialism's never actually been tried. Well, neither has actual free market capitalism
not
because the
really.
government puts its hand in everything.
I mean, you have to have some control, but to
Yes, yes,
deregulate,
and I'm not saying no regulations whatsoever. Like Mark Andreessen was talking about this. Like,
that was a good podcast.
yes,
He's
Mark
very
Andreessen talked
interesting.
about it on Joe Rogan. He said, like, yeah, obviously you need regulations about like the air, the water, like all that stuff. You can't dump chemicals into clean water. People need to drink that water. Like, that's a real thing. But you don't need certain regulations.
You don't need to regulate certain things in housing. Like, you want to fix the housing crisis, you just deregulate it. It's a problem. Like, people who are 15 years younger than us right now, the home ownership is never going to happen. It's so
Right.
unaffordable.
Well, Bill Maher talked about that in California. He said absolutely they need to start deregulating some of this stuff in California. He because he lives there, but this you can apply this kind of on a grand scale in the United States. He said it takes 3 inspections to replace your garage door.
Sure, yeah, yeah, that's true.
3 whole inspections.
Yeah, and it's like at some point voters are going to go like this is like way out of control. I mentioned to you like in 2009 I bought my house in California. Bought it for 98.6, right? Like I sold it for like nearly 400,000. Like that is like crazy. And
That's
that was
insane.
that's just a I mean, I got you get to like look at the guy who bought it, right? So like the people who buy these houses, like I get to see what they're putting down and what their finances are like. And these are like just normal people with normal jobs, and it's so unaffordable for them. It's crazy. And it's like,
California is widely unaffordable for most people.
yeah, I haven't even don't forget Syria. I want to talk about Syria. Like gas prices, like heating your home in the winter is so fucking expensive that I've been using my mini split and running it off of electricity to heat my living room because it's just cheaper. Like natural gas is unaffordable. Like we're talking like $900 gas bills a month. Like that's what I got hit with last year.
Yeah, dude, I know people who heat their homes here in Pennsylvania with like propane, and the filling of a propane tank is like thousands of dollars, and you're just hoping that it lasts you the year. Like, and you got to have a good enough job where you can accept, say $3,000, $4,000 at one time to fill your tank for the year. A lot of people don't have $3,000 that they can just drop on something.
We know nobody has $3,000 they can drop on something because credit is through the roof. People are just borrowing money now, and
Yeah, they
I don't
said,
know.
I think Unusual Whales just put something that credit card debt just increased by like 1.9%, something like that. It's in the trillions of dollars, but credit card defaults are down, which is good, but they're only down by like 1.1% or something like that. So you have the ability to look at economic measures here. Like everybody has the ability to do it. And those are the things that actually matter. You and I have talked at length about how the economy looks to regular people, and you're still seeing like articles come out that be like, well, this is why regular people get the economy wrong. But everybody looks at the economy and just in terms of the stock market, but I think only like 39% of people own stock or something like that. Like it's not even that high of a number. But if you look at credit card debt, that is actually an indicator of the economy because people have to live on credit and not on just the funds that they actually have. So that's more of an indicator on where people stand in life than the stock market does because everybody has credit cards.
Well, what I mean, I'm not, I'm self-taught, so like I'm no genius, but I'm invested in the stock market in credit card companies for a fucking reason.
Well, yeah, I mean, they stand to make tons of money. A big thing that credit cards do, right, is they put out points. Like you get points for purchases, whatever. You can use it to reduce your balance. You can purchase things with it, whatever. There's like $2 billion worth of unused rewards for credit card points because people either just hoard them or they don't know how to use them or whatever. They just let them sit there. It's $2 billion like worth.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, let's go to Syria really quick. So the Assad regime is like basically gonna fall. These rebels have taken Aleppo. These are like ISIS fighters, so
What's
like
Aleppo?
a
No,
place in Syria.
that's a throwback to Gary Johnson.
Oh, that's right. I forgot all about that. That poor bastard. Yeah, so Iran, all these like proxies kind of fell overnight, and this is like Iranian weakness, right? Because Syria is kind of like the middle of, it's like a hub for all this horrible shit all around them. And so you kind of see like the Middle East completely collapsing now. And it's the reason why like you want somebody to be like with Saudi Arabia. You want like allies there because everything is like built on sawdust, and it's all just shaky, and it fell. It collapsed. And
Oh, definitely. I don't think anybody saw this coming, like the Syria thing,
I did
because
actually, but only because there's a YouTube channel I follow, but he predicted this like 2 months ago. He's like, by the way, there's going to be like a civil war in Syria. And it was like plainly obvious to me after I saw what he said, but obviously like I didn't, like you said, like who saw this coming? I mean, most people know,
well, I guess to be fair, the reason I say that is like the last civil war I don't think ever ended.
That's pretty much it.
Yeah, I mean you have a group of rebels that are coming in and they took Aleppo and they've actually started taking more of Syria to the point where Iran is actually sneaking troops in to Syria to try and push these rebels back. And you're starting to see how much of the Middle East relies on Iran,
Mm-hmm.
which is another big reason why Joe Biden giving them their $6 billion was a horrible fucking idea. Because clearly none of this shit happened until they freed up all that money. But we saw Israel come to like a ceasefire deal with Hezbollah, which apparently has been violated by Israel, according to the
Well,
reporting.
I would say
According to the
Hezbollah.
reporting I've seen, was that Israel was still bombing and stuff like that even after the ceasefire deal was signed.
May
But
I
that's just what
caveat
I've
it?
seen.
60
Absolutely.
days. So the ceasefire is a 60-day window. They have Israel has the first of all under the ceasefire agreement they have the right to attack Hezbollah for any reason whatsoever, and second of all they have 60 days to pull out. So what happened? Like the way that border works with Lebanon is that Hezbollah had set up like three different lines between the Litani River and the border. And so Israel basically went and cleared out. They lost like 89 soldiers to do this, but they cleared out that first line. They cleaned it, and then the other two they can't go further and further into Lebanon because you can't just like do that
Right.
unilaterally. So then Lebanon is like, okay, well, Hezbollah kind of controls Lebanon, and so now it's like, okay, well, Lebanese army and the UN, whatever they're UNIFIL. They said they'll control that kind of border area, which is interesting and whatever. But those are the terms of the ceasefire.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, I didn't know exactly the terms of the ceasefire. I just know that the deal was there, and from what I had heard, that Israel was violating it, but I didn't know the terms of the deal. So that makes sense to me. I wasn't saying
It
either for or
No,
against
no.
in any direction, but we're seeing that kind of wind down a little bit. We'll see where that
The,
goes
yeah.
into the
So
new year and
see where
stuff.
that goes, because you say into the new year, it's into January 20th, because
Yes.
this is just them buying time until they can get a president who has any. I mean, say what you will about him, and I don't agree with him on everything, but his foreign policy worked, and building a fucking pier is not a foreign policy win.
No.
And so I would like to see a little more stability in that area. But you got like, ISIS is now going to reemerge, and they're going to have all this. And there's a reason why Iran is like shuttling troops in to fight ISIS or whatever, because ISIS is like this undying corpse that keeps coming back. And uh, Iran is like, their entire economy is like an energy economy. They don't do anything else. That's all they've got is oil. So it's kind of like they only they're only powerful because of the region and how they control the region.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens in Syria, because I will say we haven't heard too much of Syria in I would say the last couple of years.
It's been quiet.
Yeah, but I'm sure there's been a lot going on there that just people aren't talking about. I feel like after the whole Assad is using chemical weapons on his own people thing, which was, I think, proven false,
No, he
everything
did.
just kind of stopped out of Syria.
Well, he
I'm
did. He
pretty
did
sure all
gas
the
his own
reports that
people.
came out on that were that he did not authorize the use of that,
Okay,
like,
well,
nerve gas and shit on
I'll
his
look
own
into it.
people.
I'll look
Yeah,
into it.
you have to look in. I'm pretty sure that came out that he was not actually responsible for that. But then, Tulsi Gabbard comes into the Trump administration, and all of a sudden Syria is back in the limelight, right? Because she went and met Assad and like all this other stuff. I don't know. It will be interesting to see January 20th what starts to happen, because he seems to be getting Donald Trump is who I'm referring to, seems to be getting like his ducks in a row and getting people in line and be like, this will happen very quickly. And I would be interested to see what exactly happens very quickly as we move into January and February.
I mean, that's why I said he's basically the president right now, because
Yeah.
he's saying all this, and all these world leaders are like agreeing with him. He's not in power right now, and that's wild to me. It's actually like, it's kind of a constitutional crisis if you think about it, because you don't have like a president or a vice president that's like engaged at all. They're just
Well,
completely checked
no.
out,
Kamala Harris left for like Hawaii and then spent a bunch of time, I don't know,
getting liquored up.
completely away from the cameras. And then she comes and releases some fucking video telling people that like they still have the same power they had prior to the election. And like she looked terrible. Like,
She was shit faced. She was drunk, and her staff hates her obviously because they made her. They did that. I would like, if I was an
well,
advisor, I'd be like, don't do that.
she had a 92% turnover rate during her tenure as vice president, so her
There you
staff
go.
definitely don't like her. But as we said, like, her campaign was running a lot of Biden people who wanted Biden to obviously remain, because that was their jobs basically. And why would they like her? I mean, she lost Donald Trump, but now she says keep her options open because it's apparently going to be her and AOC going for the top spot there
Yeah,
for president in 2028.
AOC 100%. And actually, it makes a lot of sense, because the Republican Party is also going through that same shift, which is like, we got a lot of old people in this party, and we got to like get younger. And
Sure,
AOC is going
but
to moderate too.
The problem with AOC is a lot of her backers, these little socialist people, are like, she's great. She doesn't take money. She does. It was just discovered that she's made like a shit ton of money
Of course.
off of what she's doing and stuff. And I remember one of her very first things she did when she got in her position was try to get an increase in her salary because she couldn't afford to pay for an apartment in DC on her salary
I
of
believe
like
that.
$150,000.
I believe that. I mean, look, Congress hasn't had a pay raise in since like 2008 or something.
Don't go into public office if you're looking to make money.
I agree with you, but
You're
there's
supposed to be there. You were supposed to be there to support the people, not to make money.
but
So,
you have to have a okay. I granted all that, and it's going to make me sound actually terrible. But I thought Dan Crenshaw recently made a good point about this. He is not innocent in all of this, by the way, because he makes a shit ton of money as well.
yeah, that's why he's on autopilot. He's the second highest stock portfolio next to Nancy Pelosi.
Well, my overall point being that like there are members of Congress who come from poor districts who really can't live on what they make, and they're not big names, and they don't have like a lot of power. And I don't know, man. It's like really complicated to say like maybe Congress should get an increase in their pay now after all these years, but
Or maybe the most liberal fucking town in America should fix the problem with their extremely high cost of living.
nobody lives there basically. That's the whole deal, right?
Well, unless you work for the government or you're in finance. I mean,
Well,
that's
go to
like those are the two
Virginia.
types of jobs that you can get. So,
We have one listener who's gonna hate that I just said all that, by the way. But there is some like there's some evidence. There's some like I think there's a good argument to be made that like somebody from bumfuck Missouri should probably be making a little bit more money if they're going to be in Congress. I know it's $150,000 seems like a lot because it is, but anyway, I don't know. I haven't thought about that enough to like. I haven't.
form an opinion. I got
Not
it.
really. Yeah, I heard the argument made, and I was like, oh, something there. Okay, let's. You got anything kind of light?
Not really.
I do. I watched. You've been watching Landman.
Yes,
Great show.
I love it. It's great.
I have another recommendation. Say Nothing about the Troubles in Ireland. I watched the whole thing. It was really good.
Yeah, you've been saying that was pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, there's the IRA thing is like pretty wild to me just in general, but then like they have a dramatization about this woman who was the show's really about people who were just like disappeared. So like the IRA was like they would just take people who they didn't like or people who were just informants and they would take them out to the beach and bury them. They would kill them and bury them. And the show's about a woman whose job it was to drive those people out to get killed and compelling that part of it at least
That's
because
on Hulu, right?
yeah, yes. And there's this project done by the University of Boston or something, one of these universities there. They had a project where they were going to get everybody who was in the IRA to go on record when they died and say like this is what we did. And the show's kind of about like them telling their stories about what the shit that they did.
Okay.
Yeah, because they've sealed it away in a vault somewhere in Massachusetts. Sort of like the whole I think it was Gerald Ford, same thing. He was like, you could tell my story after I'm dead. And that's what a lot of this is about is like, yeah, we did awful shit and kind of got away with it.
To check that out.
Yeah. I also finally,
Unfortunately, I have to wrap up here.
let's do it.
I
Let's
have to go
close it
do
up.
something. I tried to send you a message on our
That's what you were
podcast here.
doing.
Yes.
Okay. Well, let's go ahead and call it then. Yeah. So watch those shows and I'll talk to you next time.
All right. See you, buddy.
Bye.